Good morning and welcome to Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV and I'm your host, Udrak Amimo. Now, Kenyan athletes could be absent from the Olympics in Brazil due to government failure to comply with global anti-doping rules. Even though the country dominates track and field events, more than 40 athletes have been banned over the last 3 years for doping. So to discuss Kenya's athletic fortunes, today's guests are the Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Dr. Hassan Wario. We have the Chief Executive Officer of the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, Jafta Rugut. And joining us a little bit later will be the President of Athletics Kenya, retired Lieutenant General Jackson Tuwei. As always, we have a panel, Mutegi Njau and David Makali. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Wario, I'll start with you because it seems that Kenya is playing with, undermining its strong reputation for athletics.
No, that's not a true position. I think we have some homework to do, but we never play with any kind of serious business like that. So yes, we're very serious on the issue of anti-doping and how we are going to tackle that.
You say we have homework to do, but we're submitting the homework late. And the challenge is that we risk being penalized for that. We were given this homework about 4 years ago. How is it that we missed the deadline?
No, we were not directly given the homework 4 years ago. I think the issues of doping came up from around 2010, 2011. And 2011 is very significant because there was a German documentary which looked at issues of doping in Kenya, and that raised, the concerns around doping. Obviously, we were not in office until May 2013. It took me just less than 6 months to set up a committee to look into these doping allegations. Remember, Kenya has been a sporting powerhouse, especially in athletics, for 50 years before that. But there was no document which showed us what are the issues around doping, who is doping, what kind of doping is going on, what kind of concerns. So we had to have a team which was led by a very prominent Kenyan professor who understands the issue of sports. And then the team, by April of the following year, 2014, came up with a report which became one of the most important documents in terms of just knowing how the ground was in terms of doping. The report went slightly above athletics. It looked at boxing, it looked at football.
Sports in general,
but boxing and rugby in particular, and football and athletics. So there were key recommendations there, amongst which was the importance of setting up a NADO, which is National Anti-Doping Agency. We embarked on that. We worked very closely with WADA. WADA gave us two very...
The World Anti-Doping Agency.
The World Anti-Doping Agency gave us two important countries, CHINADA, which is the Chinese Anti-Doping Agency. Remember, China had a problem, similar problem, even more complex problem of doping. And they also gave us Anti-Doping Norway, who babysat us, and we worked very closely with Rugut. At that time, he was the Secretary of Sports. Fast forward, there was a cabinet memorandum which was presented in November last year on the establishment of what we call Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, ADAC, which was later signed into the legal notice was signed by His Excellency the President on the 24th of December 2015. So it was from there now we had to get into the bigger things of setting up the legal framework, where we have now a bill which is I think we have the 6th version of that bill, and we also have the policy. Those were the two big entities that we could not complete by the deadline of the 11th. And we had WADA people by the 1st of February here, and we made it very clear to them that we were not going to be able to meet that, because in Kenya, that draft bill has to pass through various stages, and then it has to go to the cabinet and the parliament. Okay. So that's where we are.
All right. Mr. Rugut, the head of Kenya's Olympics Committee, Cheche, has said that government is moving too slowly to comply with these global anti-doping regulations. Would you agree with him?
What I want to say specifically is that we are in the process, and it's a long process, as Waziri has said. that the consultative process may be what would make somebody think that we are going a bit slow. But nonetheless, we've been able to accomplish milestones in the short period since the legal notice was issued in December. In the last 1 month, for example, we've been able to do a stakeholders workshop on the bill and the policy. In other words, we've shared, what is down on paper with the stakeholders as the Constitution
But if your agency
requires.
was only established in December of last year, how long have you been on the job?
Personally, I've been on the job for only 2 weeks. This is my second week.
So to some extent, Mr. Keno is right, but given that Dr. Wario used to be your boss, you can't actually disagree with him on national television, can you?
Not really, but it's still, as I say, a process, and the process is on track. We did the stakeholders workshop on 10th of February, and the validation exercise on the same will be done today. And we believe that by the end of the week, by the 29th of this month, we'll be able to present the document now validated, corrected, through the Cabinet Secretary, now onward transmission to...
Motegi, you look confused.
Yeah, I'm confused because how serious is the threat that we are going to be banned from the Olympics? Because you seem to be dragging your feet.
The threat is serious, yes, but we are also saying that action is being taken because we need to accomplish those things. We cannot pass a bill which has not gone through the consultative process. That is one. Two, we could not have also complied with all that is required by WADA without going through each step. Those are basically 3 conditions that WADA had set. The first one is the legal framework, which, as I said, the final point is today.
Which is the validation exercise
for
version 6A, which incorporates WADA input.
Yes. The other one was the issue of funding, because we could not operate without funds. But I want to confirm...
in terms of a secretariat?
In terms of the secretariat, in terms of even the processes, in terms of training, in terms of testing, it requires money. Even this process of doing the bill, the stakeholders workshops, the validation required money. We only got money 2 weeks ago. It was uploaded to our system about 10 days
Why?
ago.
Why?
That is 2 weeks ago, which I believe.
Well, I think it's the process of budgeting. We had asked for the money, what, 2 months ago? This is when we're getting it. So it's just a matter of processing.
I don't think you're serious.
Yes.
I don't think you're serious.
We're very serious, Bonamtegi. I think you also need to understand the complexity of just the process. As my brother here has said, we are at draft 6A now. So from draft 1 to 6, we have to, there's a lot of toing and throwing from here to the WADA.
Maybe at that point, then the CS, you should tell us, why is it complex? I mean, these are agencies set up in all countries, and you actually, you have a template, which were given the Chinese one and the Norwegian one. So why would it be difficult, and what are the issues that are making it complex? Maybe we need to understand.
No, I think the disjoint mainly, and we discovered that with WADA, are the legal frameworks within different countries. For instance, one of the sticking point was WADA was saying you should not have a board. And in Kenya, to run a parastatal, you must have a board between you and the government must be dealing with the board, not directly with the parastatal. And what they were saying, and that was, we spent quite a long time there trying to legally let them understand the processes in Kenya. Secondly, they thought that we could just make the law and just adapt it the following day. We said there are processes in Kenya. The Constitution says we must engage people. After that, we must take it to the cabinet. After that, it has to go to parliament for that to be law. So I think the legal framework in Kenya is very different from, say, China, from other countries, and that was a sticking point. But the other issue of, which you're working on is you have to wait for the legal notice for you to set up the structures now of the prostatal. And that structure must go to SCAC for SCAC to approve, which is something we have first tracked.
We have accomplished it this way.
And also, before Mr. Rugut came in, we had an acting person from the Department of Sports, so it was not that the office were not, operational. But with him coming in, and with his experience, we have worked with him immensely from the beginning, so he understands the whole mechanism. And that's one of the reasons.
People are looking back at the years, since 2012, when this became an issue that needed to be addressed, down the line, 2.5 years almost, that doesn't seem to have been fast enough.
I think it's fast enough because I was not in office too.
Yeah. But what Kenyans need wonder is this. We have been having threats for 50 years, as I said.
Yes.
We know doping is not proper. We have to be told by outsiders, stop.
That is the question.
Why are we saying we can't meet the deadline? Why not we being without being prompted? Why could we not do it?
You have to be very fair to us. I wasn't there 50 years ago as well. Let me tell you what.
But there must be a paper trail.
This is not there was no paper trail. And that is the saddest part.
And that's the point you made.
And that's the point I'm making. There was no record on doping. We didn't know what was going on.
Until the task force.
Until I set up a task force. Less than 6 months into the office. Yes.
But Kenyans have been victim of doping.
But people were just talking. There wasn't even a focal point. And that was the really shocking part. There wasn't somebody to focus on. So me and my PS and Rugut flew to South Africa, which is the headquarters of World Anti-Doping for Africa. And I engaged Rugut to be the focal point from that point. And that was when things started moving. Is that right?
Yes, that is true.
And that is when we engaged WADA. Let me just also tell you that we are in constant communication with WADA. Even yesterday, they sent me an email. In February, we had 2 senior WADA people here. In December 14th and 15th, they sent us their legal expert who started the process of drafting this, working with us. So I think WADA are very confident that the government is spearheading this process in the right manner. You cannot cut shortcuts with WADA. You cannot also cut shortcuts with the legal framework in Kenya. So I think that is why we couldn't, and we were very fair, very frank with them. We said we cannot meet the 11th deadline. Just give it.
You're giving up to April.
We're giving up to April.
And you're complying. You think that is a reasonable time?
We feel quite comfortable that we'll be able to.
But you've asked Parliament to fast-track the bill, which is one of the requirements for compliance.
Yes.
How confident are you that you will have a bill, the legislation in place before April? By April?
We're working behind the scenes, but also I think Parliament are our friends. They're Kenyans like us. They understand this issue. The importance of this issue. So
you have a good relationship with your committee, the Labour and
Very good.
But the government has also systems that you must table a bill and publish, stay 14 days, debate. There's a schedule. You can't fast track Parliament.
Yes, we know that. I think that is one of the reasons why we said we can't meet the 11th deadline. We are more optimistic with the 5th deadline.
So if we come to you then, Mr. Rugut, you leave the show to go to Kasarani for the validation of the draft legislation.
Yes.
It incorporates WADA input. After the validation, take us through what needs to happen before we have this enacted as a law.
Now, immediately we finish the validation, which will be later today, the corrections will be put in, and then the same document now will be handed over through the Cabinet Secretary. And through
when do you expect that to happen?
We intend to pass that document to the Cabinet Secretary's office latest by Monday. Monday
so
next week, the 29th. And we believe, because all the corrections will have been made by then, that then the Cabinet Secretary will be able to forward it through the AG, the Attorney General, because they'll have to look at the drafters in the AG's office, and then it will be in Parliament in the course of next week.
I'm sure you know some of the highlights of that bill. What really is it saying?
The bill talks, as I said, we are domesticating the WADA code, because it is WADA which has set the code. And then in Kenya now we have to adopt the WADA code, which talks about playing fair. In other words, an athlete, a sports person, is not supposed to use any performance-enhancing drugs. The counties which are signatory to this code through the UNESCO conference of 2005 also need to comply and ensure that the WADA code is adopted and that there are rules in place, following the policy now that has been set by the government, and the bill which now will be enacted into an act of Parliament to ensure that all the players, all the clubs, all the sports organizations are able to comply with that.
Wasn't part of what WADA inputted into the bill the fact that you now need to be licensed? It creates an office of registration, and that anyone involved in sports, physiotherapist, coach, doctor, whatever, has to be licensed in order for any sort of penalties to be imposed. That's one thing. And that anyone found to be trading, giving doping substances is liable to stiff penalties, whereas some of these things were confined to just the sport itself.
Let me correct something there. It is actually in the Sports Act, where in the Sports Act specifies that every federation, every club, every society, every athletics body needs to input in their constitution an element of anti-doping, that every federation should have a detail specifying that they need to comply to the WADA code, so that during the registration process, the registrar now specifies and ensures that it is inputted, it is inbuilt in that constitution. And so WADA will just be monitoring to ensure that are we compliant in as much as the sports organizations are concerned in their registration, in their constitutions. Are they put in something to ensure that they are compliant? So in the process, the bill now will ensure that what are the penalties if you don't comply with that.
But there's a very important point you raised there. It goes beyond the athlete. I think many of us are focusing on the athlete. It goes to recreational use of the substances.
Yes.
So if you're in your gym and you're building weight, you want muscles and all that, and you're using steroids and all that, you will be punishable. You'll be liable to certain levels of punishment. And there's a very good example which we were shown by Anti-Doping Norway. In fact, because they have very few athletes in Norway, track and field athletes, they're focusing more on the gyms for recreational purposes. And some of these drugs have been known to cause heart attacks, to cause different disformation of the body, and causing different problems. So it is not only about athletics or about track and field, it's also about recreational use of these drugs, which is restricted.
And you raise an important point, because we know that about 40 athletes have been banned for doping. But what about these consequences that you talk about, the heart attacks? Do you keep track of athletes who may have abused these substances and as a result are suffering health problems?
What we try to do there, and that is one of the major issues in the bill again and also in the policy, is to ensure that there is enough public education. Because part of these things, people get involved in them because they don't know the consequences on the health part. People might be focusing now on using these substances to win a medal, using the substances to be able to perform better. But then what are the long-term consequences of this? And we bring it out in public education, in trainings. We visit the training camps, and we are able to engage now the individual athletes and even the other individual sportsmen. We want to go further than that and even go to the schools, so that we start at that level. People know the dangers of doping. What are the after effects, the side effects of these substances used long-term. So that even from the secondary school sports association, we want to engage with them at that level, so that as we bring up the sportsmen, as we train them, as we identify talent, as we nurture it, we are able now to be able to keep them away from the harmful substances, which might long-term.
There's a point I just wanted to add.
Yes.
In the new structure, there is a Department of Education and Research. Most of the things we hear, and especially
within ADEC?
Within ADEC, yes. Most of the stories you hear when you interact with athletes, they're not empirical, but they may be leading
anecdotal.
Very anecdotal. They say there's an athlete who finished and just dropped dead. They talk about issues of infertility amongst athletes, various athletes, and at times they mention them by name. Deformities and different kinds of careers ending at a very young age. Somebody having run out of energy, and so on and so forth. But what we need to do now is to do the empirical thing, do research, have a database, and know where the problems are and what kind of problems and how to deal with them.
So what is the difference then between the policy and the bill? Because the policy is also a requirement, isn't it?
Yes. Normally the process is that it is the policy which informs the bill. The policy is what does the government think about the issue of doping. And that is why we want to domesticate the WADA code and say that even in Kenya here, because we are signatories to that UNESCO agreement, we need to set up how do we deal with the issue of doping in sports? How do we deal with the health of the individual athlete, the health of those people who visit the gyms and all the others? That is the policy. And the government position on that is clear. And from that now, then we get a bill, an act now which will come out and say, if you are involved in this, if you are found to have been non-compliant, what is the punishment? What are the sanctions that will be given to the individual, to the club, to the society which is involved in these practices. And more than that, even to the medical health practitioners who may be dispensing these drugs, knowing that this is now for use by an athlete, maybe to play, to be able to gain advantage, an unfair advantage over his adversary in a competition. So again, it's a whole process whereby we want to, apart from now saying this is the government position on the issue of doping, then what do we do about that person who is found to be culpable of that?
So you've told us about the bill, you've told us about the policy, you told us that you got money, what, 2 weeks ago?
About 2 weeks ago.
For your work, which Mutegi is not very pleased about. But in terms of becoming operational, how soon, what sort of timelines are we looking at? How soon do we see, medical personnel trained? How soon can we see, your structures in place, your secretariats in place?
I want to say immediately, because as I have alluded to before, the process started even before this was set up. We've been doing this as an activity within the ministry. The Department of Sports has done this together with the help of RADO, the Regional Anti-Doping Organization in charge of this zone in Africa. That is what we call Zone 5. So activities have been ongoing. We've been, attending sessions, training sessions. Whenever we have sports persons in the camps training for an activity or an event, we go there, we teach them, we talk to them. The issue of testing has been a bit slow because, again, the equipment costs money. We've not been able to have that equipment procured, but nonetheless, we've been getting assistance from RAD, as I've said, which has a facility for testing. It has been maybe not the level which we require. So what we would say is that it's immediate. We've started it already. Even 2 weeks when we had the cross-country selections on 13th of February, we were able to do tests with the assistance of RADO. And 2 weeks from now, during the First Lady's half marathon, we'll also be able to do some tests. But in the process, maybe in the coming month of March and April, we'll be able now to acquire the equipment required for more and more tests, so that we'll be able to even visit the sports camps.
We have to take a break, and I want to solicit the panelists' opinions before Mr. Rugut goes to Kasarani. I want
to ask a question about corruption before you go.
Of Mr. Rugut?
The corruption I don't know whether it's more, because it looks like people dope and it's known by officials, and then they're corrupted because somebody has already been suspended, and not by us but by outsiders. Where does corruption come in this matter?
I think the matter is being handled, and it's being handled by ADAC now.
Yes,
because it's the mandate of ADAC, but it is separated from us because it is within AK, Athletics Kenya, where that problem arose. So it's very different from the setup. ADAC now is the regulator of the sector, and ADAC is the one which has constituted the team to investigate those allegations.
Sir, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Mine is just an assurance to the Kenyan public, the sporting fraternity in the country, that we are on track. Because I think the fear has been that with the threat of banning from the participation in the Olympics, people would be wondering what is ADAC doing about it? What is the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Arts doing about it? Things are on track. After the validation today and all the other things which we've specified needed to be done, the funding which has already been provided, setting up of structures, staffing. So far we've already received 7 staff members, some seconded from the ministry, so that we are able now to start some of the programs that were part of the requirements of WADA in terms of compliance. And we believe that in the course of the next 2 months, we'll be able to comply as required by WADA.
Do you think that Kenya is being singled out unfairly?
There is a possibility, because we feel that some of the bashing that we've received in the recent past doesn't seem to be fair, in as much as we know that the process has been ongoing. Nobody is listening to the process. Nobody is listening to the steps that have been taken so far. And we are only talking about we have not complied. But Waziri has been clear about the fact that this process started just about a year ago. And from the report which was released, the task force report, which shows now the landscape what is the situation in terms of doping in the country. All those steps have been taken. There's been communication back and forth between the ministry headquarters, the sports department, WADA, RADO, the regional office of anti-doping in Africa, and all this has led to, the culmination, the finalization of the documents we are talking about, draft 6.
Okay.
So that means that we've had a process ongoing for that period.
It's break time. Very quickly, David Motegi, do you think that we will meet the April deadline?
No, we just can hope.
Well, I guess because it's important, the government has to marshal its processes to comply. We've seen laws passed within 1 week and timelines reduced by gazette notices, so I don't think there's a problem with that. But before Rugut goes, how would you respond to people like me are inclined to think that you have let Kenyan athletes down. I mean, when you hear your account of you haven't had equipment to test, over the years. And most of these things, athletes are being caught almost innocent because they're ignorant. Some of the substances which are being outlawed or called, performance enhancing, would actually just be herbs that we normally chew, and we're okay with it. So it looks like you have let our innocent and ignorant athletes down over the years. And how expensive is this machine that our country hasn't bought it? We haven't bought.
Can I just intervene there?
Yeah.
For a good because first of all, up to now we don't have the capacity to test blood, so it has to be packed and taken to South Africa or taken to Lausanne.
How is that?
It is complicated. It's very expensive. Also, even the facility in South Africa, which is in Port Elizabeth, is not getting enough blood for it to sustain itself. So it's a very complicated thing. It needs a lot of government support. And what we are contemplating is to see if we can set up a facility here, probably not this year, because it's very expensive. By next year, because of the World Youth Championship, and we're working with IAAF, we will have a facility, a smaller facility here at that time, and see if we can get blood from Ethiopia and the entire region. And then that makes our center
control samples or
for testing blood. Right. So it depends on, the machine will just be lying fallow. Nobody is using it. If you don't have enough.
How much is this?
How do Ethiopian
we're looking at billions.
Okay.
How do Ethiopian test?
They send it, again, you send it to Qatar, or you send it to South Africa, or you send it to Lausanne.
Maybe just to specify, to clarify on two things. One, that facility has to be accredited by WADA. That is one. Maybe the second thing is, one test. You just carry the sample to South Africa, the courier services, and so on, and that package costs about $400 per test per person. So you can see, given the number of athletes we have, the sports organizations we have, if it is team sport, rugby, how many people do you need to test? That testing pool, the sample, how much is it? So those are now the...
But the other one about other substances, I think there was a boxer who was caught and he had chewed mirror. It has amphetamine. Amphetamine is one of the restricted substances. So that is about education. That's why it's important that we go to the lowest level and go to highest level, talk to the elite and to the high school athletes about the substances that have been banned and sensitize them from time to time.
Okay, so we have to take a break now. This is Cheche, the show where opinion counts. We're live on Citizen TV. Our SMS number is 22422. You can tweet us using the hashtag Cheche. Our conversation on Kenya's athletic fortunes continues after this break.